But I have.
Recording in progress.
For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one Metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails, and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
I'm going to call to order the Metro Council work session of June 13th, 2023. And Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Yes.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Councillor Lewis. Present. Councillor Nolan is excused today. And President Peterson.
Here, thank you. Before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
Hi, I'm John Rourke. I'm the head carpenter here at the Newmark Theater. Safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here at the Newmark Theater are the safety of our crews, the safety of the cast, the safety of the audience. I'm out here at the Newmark Theater. You're at Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of the building. In event of fire or a fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and then exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify a security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will begin our work session with the 2023 RTP update. We have had a discussion about this in the past, a few weeks ago, and gave some input to staff. And today we are joined by our new Director of Planning, and Catherine Charlo. Thank you for coming and working at Metro. We have a very long history together, and I'm so proud that you are here and working with us. How would you like to start out?
Thank you so much. I start off by thanking you, Council President Peterson, and councilors for giving us the chance to talk with you one more time, at least at this part of the spring into summer, about the regional transportation plan. What we want to do today is just a quick recap of where we are in the process. And Kim is going to give you a little bit of a slide presentation in just a moment. But to frame that up, I would just like to thank you all for the engagement with us over the past couple of weeks. Since the last council session, work session, when you all raised some questions, we've had a chance to connect with, I think, all of you and hear some of your concerns and interests. We think we're ready to share back with you some steps that we have taken and that you can take to help move us toward answering some of those concerns. And we just really appreciate your time today. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim, who's going to give you some more detail, and please don't hesitate to ask us questions as we go, because this is really the last opportunity for you all before you vote in late June on releasing the RTP project list and high-capacity transit strategy for public review. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm very excited to be here at this moment. Next slide, please. In addition to what Catherine just described, I will be providing an update, and it was also included in your work packet on the TPAC recommendation that's coming before JPAC on Thursday for their recommendation to the council. I'll go forward, please. Next slide. So the resolution that's included in your packet and the 3 exhibits are what is being proposed for release for public review and further policy discussion. It's the draft regional transportation plan and really reflects extensive discussions that JPAC and the Metro Council have had to shape the vision, the goals, also the joint workshops that you had to inform development of new policies. And the draft project list that was submitted by our jurisdictional partners as part of the call for projects earlier this fall. That project list was framed by the policies and that vision and goals that you shaped. The 3rd exhibit, Exhibit C, is a draft high-capacity transit strategy that also has been subject to a lot of staff work, but also a lot of policy discussion throughout the past year to really set a framework for investing in high-capacity transit going into the future. Next slide.
Let me take it down and reshare.
Hi, Councilor President.
Good morning.
If you stop sharing, I'll do mine.
Oh, now it's you.
Yeah, hi. So I'll keep going here. So the next slide really is just highlighting some of the new and updated policies that we developed around mobility, pricing, also resilience. There's updated maps that are guiding prioritization of investment to advance equity in the equity focus areas. Also updated are our high injury corridors, which are the corridors in the region that the highest rates of fatal and serious injury crashes are happening, and those are largely the arterials on our system. We've updated the transit policies to reflect the high-capacity transit strategy work, and then also clarified existing policies around throughways and arterials. Other more minor updates were made throughout, and these updated policies are in Chapter 3 of the draft plan. Next slide. The project list that was submitted by our jurisdictional partners totals more than $73 billion in investment, and that's investment in all parts of the system, completing sidewalk gaps, expanding transit. There's also the 3 big projects that ODOT has been working on, the Interstate Bridge Replacement, Rose Corridor, and the I-205 project, in addition to some other throughway investments. There's system management as well, and demand management. These projects, a third of that $73 billion are capital projects. The remaining is really going towards maintaining and operating the system, including expanded transit service. One thing that I would like to highlight is that the revenue forecast that is assumed to fund that $73 billion comes from a variety of sources, local, state, and federal sources. It also, for the first time, includes tolling revenues that are from ODOT's projects. I would say that the tolling revenues, as reflected in this project list, are covering the cost of those individual projects, not additional projects that would be needed to address any mitigation or diversion that has also been talked about. So I just want to be clear about what the tolling revenues are covering in this amount, and it is just for those projects themselves. Next slide. As we reported in the last work session and other discussions, we are making mixed progress. Our region is at an important pivotal moment. The plan and the investments that are being proposed are making progress toward our regional goals in many ways, but we are falling short in some of the areas that are important. We do feel, based on the analysis, that we are on track to meet our climate targets, but that also assumes that we're fully implementing the plan and getting the revenues that we need to do that, and the state is taking the actions that they identified in the statewide transportation strategy, which includes congestion pricing, includes a vehicle miles traveled user fee, and other actions that need to come to fruition as well. As we also reported, we are advancing and meeting our mobility, equity, and economy goals, but we also recognize that we're not keeping pace with investing in transit to the level that we had anticipated, both in our climate smart strategy, but in the last RTP, and more transit investment is needed than what we were able to afford in this plan. And similarly, more investment is also needed to address safety, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides, but particularly in the near term, investment in safety on those urban arterials where people are dying or being seriously injured is critical to advancing our safety goals. Next slide. Throughout the last year, and really even before last May, when Metro Council and JPACT adopted the work plan, we went through a 6-month scoping phase. We've had many opportunities to engage our jurisdictional partners, the public, business and community leaders, and we've had a lot of technical discussions, and particularly this spring, I just really want to highlight the extensive and deep engagement that we've been doing with the community on the draft project list. And that really is setting the stage for, as we move forward into this public review draft, what further refinements are going to be necessary to really make more progress and advance the RTP to council for further consideration in this fall. Next slide. So what we've heard most recently in the spring engagement, and there is in your attachment to your staff report, I think almost 300-page summaries of all of the different engagement this spring. But these themes really have resonated and risen to the top throughout the whole planning process. Safety continues to be the top concern, regardless of what part of the region we're engaging, both in terms of traffic safety, as I've talked about on the urban arterials, but also personal safety. And I really want to highlight that we are hearing that from community, just a concern for their well-being, taking transit, waiting for transit, in addition to not having complete networks to access to transit, and that this is something that TriMet is actively working to address, but there's more that we can do as a region to help people feel safe and be safe as they're waiting and taking transit. There's also recognition at this council, but also from community. We're facing a climate emergency, and we really need to be investing in ways that are doing more to reduce emissions, in addition to preparing for the effects of climate change that we're already experiencing. Maintenance continues to be a priority. Investing more in transit continues to be a priority, and completing active transportation, but particularly gaps in walking connections, sidewalks, but also ensuring that those sidewalk connections are accessible for our people living with disabilities. And that is something that, again, continues to resonate and rise as a key outcome of what the public is expecting the transportation system to provide. Next slide. So at the last work session, council asked a lot of good, important questions about, well, you know, we're seeing some mixed results here. What are the ways that we can make more progress, particularly in the near term around safety and climate? Are there opportunities to do more, particularly around the urban arterials, to advance and improve safety in those corridors, and do so in a way that's also climate friendly? what can our jurisdictional partners do around that? The projects were not projects that Metro staff put together, but these projects that have been forwarded to the Regional Transportation Plan came from locally adopted plans, studies at the regional and state level that had public processes. So these projects also represent priorities from the communities from which they came. So what are the opportunities to make more progress? And one of the pieces that Council President Peterson highlighted is, are there some scenarios that we should be thinking about as ways, as approaches to really try and move the needle to advance progress in safety and climate? Next slide. So staff did, in your packet, did identify, some different ways, that illustrative scenarios, but these are opportunities that staff have identified to further advance these goals. Our jurisdictional partners can look at their lists again as part of this public comment period as well. They have been reviewing them this spring based on the evaluation work and the engagement that we've been doing and what we've been hearing through that engagement. But jurisdictional partners can look to update their project descriptions in ways that really highlight the project features that could advance safety and climate. There's also opportunities to reprioritize or shift the timing of projects, to accelerate projects, to invest in safety, both in terms of on and around transit, but also on those high injury corridors and completing those important gaps in the system that will also help address safety and climate. Also investing more in those equity focus areas, which are the areas in the region that have higher concentration of people of color and people with low income and people who don't speak English as a first language. A third area of opportunity are specifying locations. There's bundles of projects, so there's basically what we call buckets, but there may be a bucket of safety projects on the project list, but it doesn't specify where that project or projects would occur, and they are intended to address safety, complete gaps in the system, so there is opportunity to be more specific in those projects by our jurisdictional partners so that we can include them in the evaluation. Because there was not specificity, we're not actually accounting for that in the evaluation work that we have previously presented. So that's a third opportunity that could be taken advantage of. Next slide. So in terms of what's ahead, as I said, JPAC is scheduled to take action on this resolution that was included in your materials. TPAC on June 2nd did recommend that JPAC approve the resolution moving forward. There is a discussion in your packet about that TPAC action, and if there's questions about that, we can discuss that further. But today is an opportunity for council to ask questions, to also provide feedback to JPAC members participating in that JPAC meeting on Thursday. With pending JPAC's recommendation to council, we would be bringing back JPAC's recommendation to the Metro Council on June 29th. And as Catherine said, that really starts a next phase of our process. It's a starting point, not an end point. It's not endorsing the plan. It's not adopting the plan. It's putting it out for further public review and policy discussion by JPAC and the Metro Council. And we will be also working with MTAC and MPAC for them to bring recommendations for you as well this fall. So with that, I will stop there and see if there's questions. There is one slide here at the end that just had, if you have questions about the process, if you have feedback for staff about addressing the concerns that you raised about the draft project list. And then also, does council support moving forward as it's currently proposed and what is going to JPAC on Thursday?
Great, thank you. I guess, can I just start out a question? Usually I wait, but I'd like to go back to the slide of the opportunities.
Thank you. I was going to suggest exactly that. I really appreciate that.
Can we go back to this? Thank you. I guess my question is, in terms of federal deadlines, in order to get this in on time, how much more work would that require of our city partners, and how, before adoption or before approval? Do they have that capacity? And is there a way to get at these after adoption rather than trying to fit it in before adoption? I'm just worried about the capacity of our city and county partners after, 18 months of work? And then we try and kind of, for all good intents, try and tweak it a bit. I'm afraid of the amount of work.
Yeah, thank you, President Peterson. That's a great question. And we also share concern about our partners' capacity to really deeply adjust the project list. I think as we've been presenting the results of the analysis and what we've been hearing from the public engagement, we have been doing a soft ask for partners to look at their list. So we did have some refinements. It was a small number of projects, and I think that ask can be a soft ask as we go into this public comment period and really defer to our partners to do what they feel they can do. We have the results of the assessment of how each project scored relative to those criteria. And so the information is there for them to be able to look at it. I think there's sort of the staff capacity, but there's also the going back to their elected officials. As you may recall, all of our partners, the cities and counties, took their lists to their city councils, their county boards, the TriMet board for endorsement to submit into the process. And so I think that's another area that they're concerned about changing things when it's been endorsed, for purposes of this process. To your question about opportunities for the next, beyond the RTP, I think that's also this council and JPAC can direct staff to continue to develop this assessment that we piloted in the last RTP. I think we made some improvements. I think there's things that we would do differently or recommend doing differently in the next process, our next update. And so that is totally appreciated and welcome that, and would be part of the final action for the RTP to really set the stage for what a future rendition or building on this existing work could be for the next RTP update.
And technically, if we were to ask them to look at these projects and put features in or tell us more about what they're doing, I mean, we basically have an MTIP change. It seems like every week. I'm sure it's twice a month. But we do have a lot of opportunity to work with our jurisdictional partners over time as they develop their projects. Right? I mean, we can still work on that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I mean, I know that we do that actively, but, all right, council, I don't see any hands up, virtually or real. Any questions? So am I seeing a nod of heads that we're good to move forward with the project lists as is, with this understanding that we might want to have more conversations with our jurisdictional partners? Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. Is the public review period, once the release, is that formally required, and is it a specific time period?
Yes, Councilor Rosenthal. So under federal requirements, and our existing public engagement requirements that Metro Council adopted back in 2013, we are required to have a 45-day public comment period.
And a quick follow-up, do we expect much, or what kind of response do we expect other than from the individual jurisdictions that have already been involved?
We receive a lot of feedback from our jurisdictional partners. They will submit formal letters on behalf of their jurisdiction. We also typically receive a lot of feedback and comments from advocacy organizations, community-based organizations that have also been engaged in the process. And then we will also have an online survey that we'll have a form that the public can also submit feedback through that process. But we typically get a lot of feedback during our final public comment period, and a lot of it is more fine-tuning and refinements to improve the plan. And then there typically are larger policy things that we will identify for JPACT and the Metro Council to talk about and discuss further as we finalize it.
And Council President Peterson, if I could, one of the opportunities that will come to you all as a result of this public process is, as Kim said, to see a summary of the feedback and to essentially put your comments and your fingerprints on both the future MTIP submissions under this RTP and also looking at criteria for future project list decisions. So they're really, even if we aren't wholesale upsetting the project lists right now for the reasons you all have been discussing, there is an opportunity for you to hear that public comment and memorialize it and nudge the process toward that.
Counselor Gonzalez?
I just wanted to say thank you to staff. We get to work with them up close on this as JPAC. And it's a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of presentations, and most importantly, a lot of analysis. I just want to appreciate y'all and feel really confident about our timeline to get this approved later in the year and taking all the proper steps to do that and to be really mindful of the engagement, the reprioritization that we want to encourage, and get the best plan that we can out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just echo that as well. There's a lot that went into this, so much appreciated. A lot of thought, a lot of advancement, even though it's never going to be as perfect as everybody wants it to be. But we have made a lot of advancement, so I would just thank you for all of the hard work, Tom, as well, back there, and the entire team. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. With that, thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Lewis.
Sorry, one late ad. Old habits die hard. One late ad. I want to echo the thanks to the team for everything that they've done to work with jurisdictions to get the project list to this point. I do think it is important for me to state here on the record that I am very open to a potential add from request of a tribal government, which would be new for us here in the region and frankly would be on the cutting edge of work with tribes at the transportation level. Back in DC last week had fairly open conversation about this, and the DOT does have a tribal policy advisor, so I look forward to working with them on what our opportunities might be.
That's exciting. That's good. Good idea. Did we think about how we would proceed with that conversation?
Katie will do some work.
Katie will do some work. Thank you, Katie.
I'm a champion of Katie doing some work.
I echo that champion, and I just want to also acknowledge the work that Katie has been doing, working with us. So we have brought forward that project already in the draft list, so it's reflected in the Exhibit B, and we're working out the details around that, but this is going to change how we're doing our consultation throughout the next RTP update, engaging the tribes and even development of the revenue forecast as well as the projects and other components of the plan. So it's been, really helpful, and just really want to acknowledge Katie's incredible work in partnership with us in working through this.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Seeing no other hands raised, thank you.
Thank you.
One successful conversation down. Many more to go.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to our fiscal year 2023-24 budget work session. This work session is the opportunity for council to discuss proposed budget amendments and notes. Before we start our work session, I'd like to thank the staff for all their work in preparation for the TSCC budget hearing last week. I think it went very well since they adopted it, correct? I don't think any of us can actually say enough about the work that Metro is doing, the good work. And I'm thankful to everybody out there who has made it all happen 24/7. over a pandemic and getting us to the point where we're now coming out and being able to do so much more. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to our COO, Marisa Madrigal.
Thank you so much. And I don't see, is Brian here? Does he want to? It's all right. We'll ride this wave.
Nope.
Oh. Okay, well, should we continue with the?
I'm sorry, I could not hear what was going on over there.
It sounds like on the published agenda, the budget work session was at noon, which is different than what the
Yeah,
script says.
I think the script, I think on the agenda that we had online, we had the affordable housing bonds switched to be first or second on the agenda. So I think that's maybe why Brian isn't here. Sorry about that, not getting caught in the script. But
And here he
we
is.
do have our,
We're happy to proceed. We will proceed.
We will proceed.
Sorry for the confusion.
Brian.
And my strange befuddled
Thank you for
looks.
listening in the background to this amazing council meeting and just showing up spontaneously.
My apologies for
No,
being late.
not your fault. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council President Peterson, councilors. We are here today to talk about the kind of final steps of the fiscal 23-24 budget. And there are two main pieces to this, budget amendments, which are financial changes to the budget, and then budget notes, which document legislative intent. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we'll also talk a little bit about the final steps in the process. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, so today we are, you have the opportunity to discuss budget amendments and budget notes. On Thursday, you will actually vote on whether to include those proposed amendments and notes into the budget, and then you'll have your final public hearing on the fiscal year 23-24 budget. And then on June 22nd, you will consider the entire budget, including any amendments or notes you choose to include for final adoption prior to the required June 30th deadline. Next slide, please. So we're going to start by going through the budget amendments. I will briefly review them. You will have an opportunity to discuss them. And then, so the major questions today are, do you want to forward those for consideration on Thursday? And then do you want to consider them individually or all at once? In the past, council has preferred to consider all of the amendments together rather than voting on them individually. Next slide, please. So the most significant amendment in the budget is a series of personnel additions totaling 18.2 FTE. They fall into a couple categories. So in finance and regulatory services, there's a 0.2 addition, making one position whole. And then the next positions in human resources and communications are connected to a larger addition for our housing department. So the positions in HR and communications are to support the new work in housing. Next slide. The bulk of the positions, 16 FTE, are in the housing department, grouped into these categories. If you have specific questions about them, we have housing staff and their finance support here, and I will defer any answers to them. Next slide, please. This is also the time of year where if there are projects that were planned for the current fiscal year but did not either didn't get started and need to roll over, or were started and not completed, where we need to take budget action to move appropriation from the current fiscal year to next fiscal year. So several of the budget amendments are related to that, really kind of questions about project timing. So in the general fund, we have an increase of approximately $460,000. That's primarily for rolling forward some contracts and projects. Our general asset management fund, similar situation, an increase of $373,000 for moving projects forward. Next slide. We also have a change in our general obligation debt service fund. This is to process the refunding we did. We successfully completed just last month, basically refinancing a portion of our zoo debt. to take advantage of some market conditions. So we need to increase the appropriation there because we are accelerating the repayment of the debt service. Then we also have an increase in the solid waste fund of $1 million related to a project carry forward. Next slide, please. In the capital improvement plan, we have a couple of changes in our IT and records management department and parks and nature. And these are really, so as you recall, the capital improvement plan is a 5-year plan. And so this is adjusting dollar amounts for projects based on timing. So we've got a small increase in IT and then a larger increase in parks and nature, which are really just reflective of when those projects are actually being completed. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions. And again, this is opportunity to ask questions, deliberate. Do you want to consider these on Thursday? And then how do you want to consider them, together or individually?
So my recommendation is we consider them all together. If anybody has one that they want to pull out for, discussion, we can certainly do that. But counselors, any questions for Brian? Counselor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question. I was looking at, in going through the one FTE for communications, which was listed as support for housing. I guess I'm a little concerned because we did the recent study that said that communications outreach in general for general metro goals and policies, in particular communication outreach to some of the cities surrounding that are not part of metro, but that affect our metro population and jobs planning. And I'm just wondering if that communications position, or should we be looking at another communications position to deal with the result of that survey that we did that said we are lacking in certain kinds of communications about Metro's overall goals, not just housing. I mean, I agree, we need more communication on the housing issue, but I'm just wondering if there's room in there, or is that the only thing that position can be used for?
Councilor Rosenthal, I would also add, I think that's an excellent question, but in the stages of the budget you've already considered in the proposed budget, there were additions from the budget the COO recommended that included additional engagement staff in GAP-D, Government Affairs and Policy Development function, as well as some additions in central communications that I think go to addressing those gaps that you identified. But Marisa, if you want to add anything.
That's absolutely right, Brian. Councilor Rosenthal, we have, it's not going to happen overnight, but we are trying to beef up our sort of central communications muscle to address the findings and Tom Reinhardt's work, as well as, feedback that we have received from all of you. And we really look at that as both a communications and a government affairs function. This position would be dedicated to housing, and I can tell you that most of our partners have dedicated, there's so much interest from the public in this subject that we are really kind of behind the ball not having a dedicated resource to support the strategic communication, media requests, and just, general communication that we need to have with the public about our results in housing, both on the bond side and the supportive services side.
Great, thank you. Anybody else with a question? Go ahead, Councilor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. Just looking through some of the line items, I was wondering if I could get some more information on the solid waste fund, and can you just explain what the project carryover for that $1 million is? And I also have some questions on the capital improvement plan for the parks and nature, and is that $2 million supplementing existing projects, or are they kind of individual line items for new work?
We'll start with the parks and nature. Cinnamon Williams will be able to talk about the solid waste carry forward. In parks and nature, this isn't additional appropriation. This is changing the timing of when those projects are happening. So they were scheduled further out in the capital improvement plan, but they expect some of that work to happen in fiscal year 23-24. So we're moving those projects forward. But there's no overall change to the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Hi, Cinnamon Williams, Financial Planning Director, she, hers. Thank you for that question. It's actually the Investment and Innovation Program. Those grants that we give out are on a calendar year basis, so the timing of those payments kind of get a little wonky over the fiscal year basis. So that's the expectation of the program manager says that these actual invoices haven't come through. They expect another $1 million of those particular already awarded program costs to come through at a little bit later date. And so that was our estimate.
Great, thank you. Thanks for clearing those both
Yeah,
up.
no problem. Thank you.
All right, Counselor Rosenthal, and then, I'm sorry, Counselor Lewis and then Counselor Rosenthal.
Sure, thanks so much. I just wanted to chime in that I'm extremely supportive of making these housing investments, and thank you for bringing them to us. It's timely, it's important, and the opportunity to have everything embedded within this budget and not be doing add. It means that we can be really strategic with our hiring and the pacing, and I'm also happy to see the recruiter to give the HR team this specialization that they need to make sure our team is fully beefed up, and the opportunity to hire folks who are systems thinkers, can work across jurisdictions, and do that systems level planning and data analysis so that we're not duplicating efforts that are already embedded within the counties, but instead are in the system improvement and implementation of innovation kind of department where our measure really directs us to make our investments. So thank you for bringing that forward. No, it's kind of awkward to bring forward such a large amendment. I think it's absolutely right, and I would have written a budget note asking you to come forward before next year anyway, so good work.
Thank you. Counselor Rosenthal.
Just
No, sorry.
Sorry.
I was just happy. Sorry.
Just a quick question. I guess I'm my own ignorance. I'm not familiar what the Myers project is when you listed on the parks. That's not something that I'm familiar with.
Councilor Rosenthal, that is in Parks and Nature, when they acquire a piece of property, they tend to, associate a name with it prior to it becoming part of a site. And so that name typically has some connection to the party they purchased it from. So it's a specific land acquisition.
It's a specific Myers site.
Yeah, where they're making, stabilization is when they buy a piece of property, they make a series of investments to get it to its intended natural state. And some of that work is going to be happening a little more quickly than they originally anticipated.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, any other questions about amendments? Seeing none, we'll do it as a package.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Can we bring the slides back up? And we'll go first through the budget notes that we've already received. So next slide, please. We'll go through the budget notes, and then, as I understand, there are additional budget note coming forward. Then we'll kind of do the same process, have council consideration and including whether to consider them together or individually. Next slide, please. So we had four budget notes submitted prior to this meeting. So the first one from Councilor Gonzalez allocates funding to support membership in economic development and community business alliances. There's one question here. So in the budget amendments that we just discussed, it's a small dollar amount, so I didn't call it out, but we have added this to the budget. It's approximately a $12,000 addition to make those contributions. So a question for council is, number one, do you want to include this budget note, given that it's not needed? So the actual changes in the budget. But if you want this documented, we could keep it in the packet, but we should amend it to include a note that we've made that change to the budget to include that funding.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Thank you, Council President. Brian, thank you for bringing this up. We felt that it was important to bring it through the formal process, just as an acknowledgement to the public nature of how we want to work with the budget, and also get in the council's opportunity to kind of give a formal thumbs up, even though, we've kind of already given a thumbs up, I guess you could say. So yeah, I'm happy to keep it here.
And yes, you can make a note that it's in the budget.
Excellent, thank you. The second budget note from Councilor Wong is a request, a report from staff detailing grant funding awarded to community-based organizations for fiscal '23, including the desired outcome and status. Next slide, please. So budget note 3 from Councilor Rosenthal would direct WPES to create a special initiative to identify ways to improve plastic reuse and recycling. And then budget note 4, again from Councilor Rosenthal, would focus information coordination and outreach beyond the existing metro communities to deal with regional issues that affect smaller regional communities. So those are the 4 budget notes we have. And maybe this would be a good time to discuss the additions that are being proposed.
Councilors, any questions? I'll just note that I've already talked to the mayor of North Plains. We're going to be having some further conversations, and probably also with Sandy, considering that their IGA is evidently out of date. We're gonna work on those 2 cities and start with that. So I'm happy to have this budget note, but I think we've already started down that process. Councilor.
Madam Chair, I realize that we've already started this. We've been incorporating Vancouver for a long time in a lot of our considerations. And the reason I brought this forward is because I keep hearing from some of the cities in my district about the impacts of the developments in say, Woodburn and in Newburgh on both traffic as well as things going on in these other communities. I also hear this around Canby, which affects both Oregon City as well as Wilsonville. So I just thought it's important to stress that the region has actually grown in concept larger than what originally it was envisioned.
So I don't have a problem with the budget note. I just want to figure out and work with staff to figure out how to do outreach. What does that mean? Because we don't want to look like the big bad metro coming in to tell everybody what to do. So I think we just need to be careful about how we're having that conversation. Councilor.
I'm sure I can find it. My computer died. Can you remind me for notes number 3 and number 4, is there a budgetary implication to it, or is it more of a request for staff to do this within their existing resource allocation?
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. Our view is those budget notes as written currently don't include additional budgetary requirements. They direct staff to do some work that I think potentially could result in budget asks in the future, but the initial phases do not.
Okay. Any other conversation? Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Regarding budget note number 4, I'd like to echo that we already have ways of communicating with the smaller cities, and that in doing this work, we need to ask them how they'd like to be communicated with. For instance, we have a rural rep on our MPAC, and Mayor Hodson comes in when he feels like it's appropriate and doesn't always want to attend yet another meeting, and I respect that. I do think it's most important that we focus that staff position actually on working with CPOs and hamlets who may be actually in our jurisdiction, in our taxing area, yet don't have planners on staff, so don't engage with us as proactively as some of the cities listed. I would also suggest that we don't actually allocate 1/4 of the FTE and we leave it at the COO's discretion. A quarter time is 10 hours a week, and that's a lot of time that, I look at some of my smaller cities, and if we had 10 hours a week to give them, they might be able to complete 2040 grants. We might be able to give them technical assistance for federal grants. We should just remain flexible with that new capacity that we've been long awaiting within planning.
So based on that suggestion.
2 line edits. 1, add hamlets and CPOs as priority areas, and 2, to remove 1/4 time as a strict allocation of time.
Is that a friendly amendment?
No problem
that you will
with the
accept?
amendment. I have no problem with that amendment.
Okay, good, thank you. If we're done with those, I have 3. That, Connor, you have 1 pager, thank you. Councilors, I've never asked for budget notes before, but I think I wanted to be more clear this time around of things that we have talked about doing, or I've talked about, and see if we can get some progress made on them. The first one would be, and I'll just read it, directs GAPD staff to conduct outreach to jurisdictions in East Multnomah County, Clackamas County, and Western Washington County to gauge interest in participating in a, quote, regional solution-style collaboration, which would dedicate and co-locate Metro staff and volunteer jurisdictions to partner on projects of mutual interest in areas including but not limited to planning, transportation, garbage and recycling, parks, affordable housing, I mean, everything we do. Staff should report back to Metro Council no later than January 1st, 2024 with possible projects, including high-level estimated cost, staff time, and project timeline. So there's no budget note here in terms of an actual, but it would come with a proposal in January to see where we're at. Obviously, time and resources in the meantime.
That was for number one.
Sorry, is it? Counselor?
Sorry. I was asking if that was just for number one or for all of them.
No, just, well, for no, not for all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Number two, would council directing the COO to contract out for a report to determine how the overall financial health of local jurisdictions within the region and the current gaps in services impact the development and redevelopment potential of land within the UGB and future growth of all types of housing and/or employment land. I feel like this land readiness issue that we have, the issues that we're going to have in downtown Portland, as more buildings go back to the bank. There's a series of things that are happening in our region that are not allowing us to move forward and actually closing the gap on housing and family wage job creation all the way to our strategic goals that we're going to be creating. So I'd like to get some sort of next step from what the PBA did and be more specific about what this region needs in order to have financial health and start a conversation around that. So that would require some estimated amount of money to contract out. And then the third one would be council directing the COO to identify one limited duration FTE to be assigned to work with the COO, WPES director, and Metro Council president to clarify regional waste outcomes to guide reforms of waste system and solid waste fees for the fiscal year 24 annual budget. There's a lack of specificity on this at this point, but it's a direction to be able to actually carry out what the council already asked of staff, and that is to, if we are actually trying to reduce waste going into the landfill, then how are our policies and our rates and our work with the private sector, how is all of that affecting that actual goal? And are we getting the goals that, are we actually achieving the goals? Or do we need to have reform within the system to achieve the goals?
Yeah.
That's the point of that one.
Question.
Yep, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. So for number three, during our last rate setting conversation, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of stakeholder engagement, right? And also an expression from the council for staff to do a whole set of things and is this that budget?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's what I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Council President Peterson, if I could ask a question briefly. For budget note number 3, is the intention to add a new limited duration position to do this work? And if so, we may need to budget notes can't add positions or budget authority, but we can easily prepare one.
My understanding was to take an existing is what was discussed with staff.
Yes, I think so. I think what Brian is just saying is that, so a budget note we need to do an amendment if we want to redirect resources. So if council decides that this is the
I understand.
the
I believe
direction,
it's
we would
an
need to
internal
have
position.
accompanying amendment to assign an FTE, and then also for number 2, we would need to have an amendment to identify the amount of funding that would be spent on that contract.
Yep.
That's correct.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 questions, actually. The first one on number 2 is, that can be to determine the financial health of surrounding jurisdictions can be somewhat complicated. Is this anticipated to be through an amendment to add staff or to a contract?
Contract.
To add a contract, okay. And then which I would assume. And then the second question on number 3 is, and I have been in discussions of the need in order to deal with the last one, solid waste fees. There's some concern over, and there has been for some time, over, so shall we say, transparency of rates. And there has been proposed in the past a rate transparency study. Would that be incorporated into this such that, and I've heard estimates of on the order of, again, that would be a consultant fee, something on the order of 60 to 80,000, I think. Is that correct?
That would be something that if we wanted to include it, yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, what I understand from staff on number 3 is that we had basically been moving in that direction. I'm just trying to clarify that we're going to do it.
Fine.
Because I feel like sometimes these things get put off or put on the back burner, and so I'm just trying to make sure that they're brought to the fore. Yeah, Councilor Wong.
Yeah, thanks. I think these are all great ideas. Just for number 3, I see it's to work with the COO, WPAS director, and the council president, and
To set it up,
Yeah.
and then come back to council.
okay, I would just hope there would be a role for councilors to join
Yeah.
in and participate as well.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
I just wanted to specify how to get it going.
Can I ask
Yeah.
another all right, I don't know if you have a question, I've already asked one.
Just real quick on just budget note number 1, thank you, appreciate it. The partners, so the county, Clackamas, Washington County, out in East County, at least for right now, there's been a lot of coordination between like, not just the county, but like the port and other folks. Could we also include that language in there as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
We just can't allocate their staff.
Right.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Counselor. So, for number 2, I want to make sure I understand it as well. So in case there's a gap that I can, offer some ideas. But so we're talking about readiness. We're talking about, during Governor Kotek's campaign, talking about a certain number of units that we need to build, certain acre, all those talking points that were out there. And so this report will help us say, all right, this is the status of I'm guessing like the housing pipeline at every step and or ECDev land and what we can do at each step. I guess I want to understand a little bit more about it. So,
Of the land that we have
Of the land
available
that we
today, of the 18,000 acres or so, what is the availability of resources to actually have that land developed?
okay, so it'd be
It's a
like
land readiness issue.
like a more updated, obviously with today's costs, today's pressures on what would it take to actually activate what we have.
Right, and what are the actual resources available to our jurisdictions to do so? So what's the gap?
Okay, and both on employment and housing.
Yep.
Okay, cool. That sounds cool. Great. Just wanted to make sure that I got it all.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, one other question that occurs to me that I see that your budget note number 1 and my budget note number 4 sort of address some of the similar concerns or similar issues. Is it necessary to have both of them, or could they be combined and to address some of the same concerns?
I'm more
Maybe there's a subtle difference that I'm not seeing.
It's a stark difference, actually. I'm talking about inside the urban growth boundary.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we don't have the resources to be able to go and talk to North Plains about their needs.
Okay.
And give them staff, right? I mean, this is about the jurisdictions inside the urban growth boundary.
Okay.
So I think just to be very clear.
Okay.
There's just a lot of, I think.
No, I understand the difference.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say why I felt it was so important to do this first stage of a regional solutions is because it's really important that not only do the jurisdictional folks feel supported by Metro, but that Metro staff understand where our jurisdictions are and where they want to be and what they need help with. And I feel like we can help bridge that gap by actually having folks work out in that area, even if it's part-time or less, but at least a day a week. At least you're going to understand closer if you're living it on a day-to-day basis by getting to a co-located place. What does it look like on the ground? How does it feel? What are the barriers? They're different than Portland. And I think we need to we need better understanding and deeper understanding of what that means from both sides. What can Metro provide and what is the need? And I feel like that's the importance of the co-location.
No problem.
So we can flesh out a little bit more, because this was put together quickly, but we can come back with more information with Brian.
Thank you. We will work with your staff and make sure we have these kind of fleshed out in the right format for Thursday's meeting.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Yeah, Councilor Lewis.
Sure. For number 2, I am broadly supportive of the direction. I see the words contract out, and that is a phrase that I'm always on the lookout for. We generally are able to hire some of the best and brightest, and I would like to see if any of our data resource folks are able to be part of that. I understand we need outside authors, but I don't want it to necessarily mean that we're contracting out for all of the work that some of which we could do in-house.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I believe our financial folks and our data resource folks would be the resources for a lot of this.
Yep.
But there's a lot that's also not within even our purview of authority, but is within our influence, and that's what I think makes that contract healthy.
Yeah.
Okay.
At this point,
Yeah, Councilor Roy.
If I could just revisit my proposed budget note for a minute, I just wanted to give some reasoning behind it. This was kind of from the onboarding of our social innovation director, and it was difficult to see, who our partners were across the region in terms of CBOs. So this amendment is intended to improve our situational awareness and be able to better tell in one place, who we're granting funds to and partnering and things like that. It should also capture kind of like discounts that we're giving to venue usage that came up in our expo budget conversation. So really just a way about one place where we can all look and see kind of how our relationships are with partners across the region. Thanks.
Thank you, that helps. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Brian.
thank you.
I think that we're done with that portion.
I think the other question is, we'll plan on presenting the budget notes all together, assuming you want to use the same approach for that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Agreed. Package it up.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Again, thank you for getting us to this point. And for miraculously showing up. All right, we'll move on to the Metro Affordable Housing Bond 2022 Annual Report. It's our presentation, our annual presentation, and includes findings from the Affordable Housing Bond's 3rd Annual Report with implementation progress, and the Affordable Housing Bond Committee Oversight Co-Chairs will present their recommendations. Right, we have Patricia Rojas, our Housing Director, to kick us off.
All right. Good morning, Council President and Metro Councilors. My name is Patricia Rojas. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm Regional Housing Director for Metro. And I'm thrilled to be here with you all today to present our 3rd annual report for the Affordable Housing Bond. To date, the program has committed funding to 36 projects, representing 3,392 affordable homes. We have plans in place to commit the remaining funding by 2024, and the final projects will break ground by 2026. So the program is projected to achieve at least 120% of its original production goals. And once all of the funds are expended, we will have created approximately 4,700 new homes that will provide housing from 9,000 to 15,000 people at any point in time across the region. This bond is a key tool for us to address our chronic homelessness challenges across Greater Portland. 587 apartments currently in the portfolio will provide supportive housing, and this number will increase as the remaining projects come online. And many of those will leverage Metro supportive housing dollars for services and long-term rent assistance. Today represents an opportunity to celebrate the good work of countless partners across the region. It's also an opportunity to look ahead to the next phase of our broader community work. While the Affordable Housing Bond is making a significant impact, our region still needs almost 90,000 homes for households making 50% or less of area median income. Implementation of the Affordable Housing Bond is managed by Metro's Housing Department, which also manages the implementation of supportive housing services. The creation of this new department in 2022 has enabled us to expand our capacity and support Metro's work in the implementation and integration of these two critical resources. I'd like to thank our Housing Department staff whose hard work and leadership has led to this success. We're also grateful to the Housing Bond Oversight Committee for their public service and to ensure transparency and accountability throughout implementation. And last but not least, to our co-chairs, Jenny Lee and Steve Rudman, for joining us today. And they'll be sharing the committee's findings directly with you. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to our fearless leader here for the Affordable Housing Bond, Emily Lieb.
Good afternoon. Am I on? Yeah. Good afternoon, Council. Emily Lieb, she, her pronouns, and very happy to be here today on behalf of the Affordable Housing Bond team to share an update on progress with implementation of the bond. I will be walking you through some high-level, some highlights from our annual report, and you're going to find a lot more detail in the full report, which is included in your packet today. And I want to, again, thank and acknowledge all of the staff across the Housing Department team and also our partners in communication and the Research Center for support developing the report. You can also visit our webpage for the program anytime to find a map of projects and an up-to-date dashboard. This report is part of Metro's oversight and accountability obligation. And in addition to the report that we'll be presenting today, our communications team has also been working to gather stories of people moving into bond-funded buildings and people and organizations that are responsible for the success of the program. And so you can expect to see more of those stories compiled in a publication later this year. But today we'll be walking you through more of the numbers and kind of overview of progress. And then I'll turn it over to Steve and Jenny, our co-chairs, to share findings and recommendations from the committee. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Next slide after that one. The Affordable Housing Bond Program is grounded in a set of guiding principles that were established in 2018 following the passage of the bond through extensive stakeholder engagement across the region. And those principles include leading with racial equity, creating opportunity for those in need, creating opportunity across the region, and ensuring long-term benefits and good use of public funds. Next slide, please. So before I share some of the numbers and progress, I want to start by also acknowledging the hundreds of organizations across government, business, and community who are responsible for the success of this program and playing a role in implementation at every stage, from funding to planning to the construction and operations of these buildings. Metro works to deliver the housing bond investments in partnership with 7 implementing jurisdictional partners, as well as, and those jurisdictions are responsible for administering funds. We have a small number of projects in our portfolio that are being directly developed by our public housing authorities, but the majority of projects are being developed by community and private developers in partnership with hundreds of organizations. And you can see a sampling of those on this slide, and then we had to split them onto 2 slides, so next slide. And also some of the organizations involved in operations of the buildings. So next slide, please. So most of what I'll be sharing today in our numbers and the numbers in your report are cumulative progress as of December of 2022. For this slide, we wanted to share where we're at currently as of end of March. We had 36 affordable housing projects in our portfolio. That includes 11 projects with 837 units that have completed construction, 13 projects with over 1,300 units that are under construction, and 12 projects with over 1,200 units that are in planning and permitting and design. Once completed, these collective projects in our portfolio represent almost 3,400 new affordable homes across the region, which is 87% of the bond's production goal of 3,900 affordable homes. 1,274 of these will be affordable, deeply affordable to households with very low incomes at 30% AMI or below. And over nearly 1,800 will have 2 or more bedrooms and be sized to serve families. And that represents 91% of the program's goal toward family-size homes. The majority of the buildings in our pipeline are new construction, multifamily rental developments. But we do expect to see a few smaller affordable homeownership projects, which we are reviewing and that will be entering the pipeline in coming months. Next slide, please. So in 2022, we reached an important milestone of having our first projects to complete construction and lease up. As of December, over 528 people had moved into new homes. That number is higher now. Unfortunately, we aren't able to gather it day by day. But we've got 6 projects that had leased up across Beaverton, Forest Grove, Gladstone, Gresham, Portland, and Tigard. Next slide, please. And as you can see, these investments are distributed across the region and are expanding access to affordable housing in places and communities that historically have not included affordable housing opportunities. 42% of the homes in our pipeline are in areas that have historically lacked affordable housing, so lower than the average per capita rate of affordable housing across the region. 67% are in areas where communities that are at risk of displacement live today, and 45% are in areas that have historically been inaccessible to communities of color. The geographic distribution of affordable homes provides residents with greater choice about where to live, connects people to schools, jobs, and other opportunities, and prevents displacement in changing neighborhoods. Next slide, please. To ensure economic access to the economic opportunities provided by the bond investments, the program aims to direct construction contracts to underrepresented firms. As of now, the program is on track to meet or exceed the regional goal of at least 20% of construction contract funding going to COVID state-certified minority or women-owned or emerging small businesses. So the data you see on the slide represents data for the first 7 projects to complete construction. For those 7 projects combined, there was a total of over $33 million of construction contract that was paid to COVID-certified firms. And that represents 1/4, so 25% of that total construction contract dollars for those 7 projects. Of the COVID-certified firms that are represented in that number, 42% of those payments went to minority-owned businesses, 43% went to women-owned businesses, and 10% went to emerging small businesses. Additionally, 12% of funding went to service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. That's not shown on the pie chart because it overlaps with the other categories. And then looking at the second pie chart that you see is a breakout of the minority-owned businesses, specifically For those firms, 59% identified as Latine or Hispanic, 29% identified as Black or African American, 5% as Asian and Pacific, and the remaining 7% did not provide race or ethnicity data. Next slide, please. So the last slide showed contracting goals. With this slide, we're showing some information about the actual workforce diversity. This is something that all of our partners have included an aspirational goal of advancing workforce diversity across their projects. And currently 65% of the projects in the bond portfolio have committed to track and report on workforce diversity. This data is intended to help establish a baseline on which future workforce diversity goals could be established, and it represents the first time many of our jurisdictional partners are gathering and reporting on this kind of data. Of the 7 completed projects, there were 3 that tracked and reported on workforce diversity outcomes, and for those 3 projects, we saw an average of 42% of labor hours worked by people of color, an average of 16% worked by apprentices. Less than 2% were worked by women. Again, this is really a preliminary sample of just 3 projects, so we expect to see more data that we can bring you in next year's report. Next slide, please. The bond framework identified priority communities to be served by this program, including communities of color, families with children in multiple generations, seniors and older adults, veterans, people experiencing or at risk of homelessness, people with disabilities, and people experiencing or at risk of displacement. Our portfolio includes a range of buildings with different mixes of unit sizes intended to serve different household sizes and configurations. And many of our buildings also include partnerships designed to and design features that are intended to serve priority communities in this list. Next slide, please. As required by Metro and our local jurisdiction partners, all of our projects include plans to and commitments for affirmative marketing, low barrier screening, and prioritized referrals to ensure that the projects are reaching the priority communities they intend to serve. 26 of the projects in our pipeline include partnerships with culturally specific organizations working across to support outreach, and some of these partners will also be involved in ongoing service delivery on site. Each of the 6 projects that completed lease-up in 2022 implemented affirmative marketing strategies in partnership with community-based organizations. Examples include marketing flyers and leasing forms available in multiple languages, partnerships with culturally specific organizations to assist applicants with translation and application paperwork, leasing information distributed to a wide range of community partners, and non-traditional outreach to reach people through social networks and word of mouth, as well as referral partnerships with service providers. Next slide, please. Initial data from these 6 projects suggests that the project's affirmative marketing and lease-up strategies are working, with a higher percentage of people of color in bond-funded affordable homes than we see in the region as a whole. Next slide. And but I would note in the footnote that only the data we receive is not complete. We're receiving data for about 56% of residents. So this is a sample we're working on. There's more improvement to make sure we're receiving as much data as we can about residents and demographics. Next slide, please. On-site services can support households with low incomes to remain stably housed. About 90% of the bond-funded projects report partnerships with culturally responsive or specific service providers who will provide resident services, case management, or wraparound services. 20 of the projects in our portfolio, representing 59% of the projects in the portfolio, will also provide ongoing case management for 587 households in permanent supportive housing units intended for people exiting long-term homelessness. Many of those units are leveraging funding for services and rental assistance from Metro's SHS fund. For example, the Hattie Redmond Apartments will provide permanent supportive housing for people exiting chronic homelessness who have requested culturally specific services for Black and African American people, with a priority given to displaced or longtime residents of North and Northeast Portland. The Urban League will provide trauma-informed, culturally specific resident services, case management, and peer support services for that building. Next slide, please. Affordable housing is subject to a number of state and federal requirements related to sustainability, and the projects in our portfolio reflect a strong commitment to sustainability and resilience. Many projects pursue Earth Advantage certification and commonly achieve the silver, gold, or platinum levels. About 2/3 of projects also participate in OHCS's multifamily energy program. And some projects are aiming for even a higher level of sustainability. For example, the Merrillhurst Commons project is pursuing Passive House USA certification, and Albertina Kerr in Gresham is the largest net zero affordable housing building on the West Coast. Metro provided policy guidance in 2021 urging jurisdiction partners and developers to incorporate in-unit air conditioning into their buildings. And Metro allocated $8 million in unprogrammed affordable housing bond funding available due to interest earnings on the bond to support AC upgrades as needed to ensure that projects in the pipeline could incorporate AC solutions, even if they hadn't initially planned to. Next slide, please. We also have requirements and gather information about community engagement, which is designed to ensure that communities who will ultimately benefit from these investments and live in the investments have a say in supporting and informing the design and programming of the buildings. In 2022, community engagement was conducted for 12 projects across 7 implementing jurisdictions, including and also Metro's site acquisition program. A total of 31 specific engagement opportunities were organized. More than 720 people participated in those opportunities, and demographic information was reported for about half of them. Of those participants, 71% were people of color and 63% were people with low incomes. All of the projects partnered with community-based organizations to support those engagement efforts. Across the 12 projects, there were 43 engagement partnerships reported. 63% of the partnerships were with culturally specific organizations. And the input gathered through those engagement processes helped to inform the design of the projects, from features like outdoor amenities, common spaces, unit configurations, security features, and parking. Next slide, please. Good stewardship of public funds is a core guiding principle of the program. Our current portfolio represents $1.37 billion in investments, of which 24%, or $333 million, is affordable housing bond funding, and over $1 million, or 76%, is leveraged from other sources. Low-income housing tax credits represent the largest leveraged funding source in the bond. Of the 34 projects in our portfolio, 32 are leveraging tax credits. After low-income housing tax credits, other leveraged funding sources include permanent loans, sponsor contributions, and state and local grants. The average investment of Metro bond subsidy is just over $100,000 per unit, which is considerably lower than the $143,000 per unit that was initially modeled to achieve our goals. And that is the result of a variety of factors, including rapid action by our partners to get funding out the door and avoid some of the impacts of cost escalation that we always knew would impact the program and that we have seen significant impacts in recent months. Next slide, please. In general, the portfolio's development costs align with similar affordable housing trends in the region and nationally. The past 2 years have brought unprecedented cost escalation due to labor shortages, supply chain issues, and increased material costs, as well as inflation and interest rate increases. At the same time, the state is facing funding constraints for affordable housing as a result of oversubscription of private activity bonds, which are necessary to finance those 4% low-income housing tax credits. So as a result of these shifts, we do anticipate a higher per unit Metro bond subsidy needed for the remaining projects in our portfolio. And we are working closely with the state and our partners to advocate for federal expansion of private activity bond availability, as well as state-level strategies to support coordination and engagement, a coordinated system to do the best we can in managing the resources that are available. Next slide, please. So I just have two final slides. Wanted to step back and show you a picture of what implementation has looked like over time. This shows the anticipated timeline for disbursement of funding. You can see kind of a ramp-up period starting immediately after the passage of the bond, where our partners were creating plans, putting out funding solicitations, making those early funding awards. We have reached kind of peak transactions in 2023, 2024, and 2025. We're expecting a kind of steady disbursement of around $130 million in bond funding per year, with that ramping down in 2026 as our final projects are funded. This does reflect some anticipated delays to projects that would otherwise seek to close in 2024, but will not be able to access private activity bonds from the state until 2025. So we are being appropriately conservative in our forecasting. It's important to recognize that developing affordable housing takes time due to the time to align multiple financing strategies, as well as pre-construction permitting and actual construction process. So we're seeing an average of 39 to 47 months from the funding solicitation through construction and lease up to get these projects on the ground. We do expect all remaining projects to, all remaining funding to be out the door by, with projects closing by 2026 or 2027 at the latest. Next slide, please. So even after accounting for that shifting financial landscape, as Patricia shared, we are, based on a forecast that we've developed with our jurisdictional partners, we expect this program to achieve at least 120% of our original production target, which will result in at least 4,700 affordable homes, which we estimate will provide housing for between 9,000 and 15,000 people across the region. And with that, one more slide. I'm going to turn it over to the Oversight Committee, but a little context on their charge. We are really grateful to the Oversight Committee for their role in ensuring transparency and accountability throughout the program, and their work over the last 6 months to review progress reports from our 7 jurisdictional partners. For context, the Oversight Committee was created by Metro Council in 2019 to provide oversight and monitor bond activities and expenditures and provide an annual report, which you're receiving today. The committee currently includes 13 members representing a diversity of perspectives, demographics, geographic familiarity, and technical expertise, including finance, housing development, housing policy, and experience working with impacted communities. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our fearless co-chairs, Steve Redmond and Jenny Lee, and they will share highlights from the memo that the committee submitted to council, which is included in your packet.
Thanks. Thanks, Emily. Good morning, everybody. Maybe good afternoon, almost. I'm Steve Rudman, and I have the pleasure, along with Jenny Lee, to co-chair the Affordable Housing Bond Oversight Committee since its beginning. And we also do double duty for Metro, is that we're both involved in the supportive housing program, where Jenny's on the Oversight Committee, and I'm on the Tri-County Planning Body. So I think this is at least the 3rd year we're making our report to you. And, this is like extremely good news. I mean, really. I mean, how often do we get to celebrate good news? I mean, I know all about this. I just love hearing all the stuff Emily said. And, great progress has been made. And we're headed to exceed all the goals that we promised voters. So, that is really terrific. In terms of the committee, next slide, please, just our process, Emily mentioned, we do receive quarterly reports from the jurisdictions, all 8 of them, and then we meet with them annually, individually, and then we meet with staff and look at some of the findings and develop recommendations that end up being in the cover letter that is to the transmittal of the report that you have. And I hope in turn, what's important is it's our report to you, but then through you, we hope it's a report to the community. And that all the other partner jurisdictions, the elected officials throughout the region, should know and celebrate this because we all work together. It's an excellent example of regional cooperation, coordination, and collaboration, and we need to build upon this success. So the findings, please, next one. I'm not going to go over them all, but it'd be great to do that, but we exceeded all the goals. Emily just talked about that. Pretty impressive. And, we're going to commit all the dollars by 2024. We also, I think, have had some promising results in terms of advancing racial equity. I'm very impressed with the geographic distribution throughout the region in areas that have not been hospitable to affordable housing or communities of color traditionally. And we're doing a lot to make sure that the jurisdictions are and the owners, property managers to ensure equitable access through the marketing, screening, referrals, and partnerships. We have focused on racial equity in terms of contracting for sure. We're achieving the 25% MWESB. We still have a great deal of work to do in our region in terms of workforce. We'll talk about that at some point, but people are taking track. If we're really talking about advancing racial equity, we really should think about who's doing the work. And we need to figure out ways to really enable people of color and women to enter the trades for good family wage jobs. And so this has been really good. And then the permanent supportive housing piece, this is really complicated stuff, as you know, but it's very interrelated. Remember, the bond predated the supportive housing measure. There was no PSH goals in the bond. There was affordable housing goals, large families, a lot of different goals, but not supportive housing. And it looks like we're going to get 18 to 20% after the fact, which is good. But we can do a lot better when we're intentional about it. And finally, last year, change is the only constant, it seems to me. And our housing market changes, and we have to kind of continually look at new challenges, as Emily mentioned. The funding landscape, really, in the past year, we're given inflation, supply chain, labor shortages, higher interest rates, and then this crazy queue at the federal and state resources through the state HCS to access the tax credits, which are very important to leverage historically for affordable housing projects. But I think Metro staff worked very well with its partners in the state, partners in the region, to kind of work with one voice to engage as a state and come out with suitable agreements. I think with Governor Kotek coming in and being a top priority of housing and homelessness, we're in a unique time in the history of Oregon that we could actually look at innovative ways to streamline and coordinate state and federal resources regarding funding priorities and decisions in the metro region, and particularly when we look at integration of bond and capital funding with supportive housing services. And with that, I'll turn it over to my partner, Jenny.
All right, thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. Jenny Lee, she, her pronouns, and I, along with Steve, serve as a co-chair of the Bond Oversight Committee. So we do have a lot to celebrate and be really excited about, and the committee has applauded the work of Metro and its implementation partners in building a successful funding program for regional affordable housing production and addressing opportunities and challenges as they've arisen through the life of the program. This solid foundation allows the committee to make recommendations that aim to maximize the impact of this important resource and equip the region for the essential work to come. So our recommendations from the committee include convening stakeholders to regionalize best practices that strengthen equitable access to bond-funded homes. And by better understanding local standards and practices, barriers to access, and effective practices for affirmative marketing and proactive leasing supports, Metro can support greater consistency and improved long-term outcomes throughout the region. Additionally, for the public to fully understand the program's progress, especially towards its stated racial equity goals, we recommend that Metro and its partners prioritize improvements in reporting and data quality, especially related to the occupancy and workforce outcomes. So the committee, I think Steve's point about who is doing the work and racial equity in that strongly resonates with us, and so anything we can do to improve that is of great value to understanding these outcomes. Next, continuing to work with partners to integrate and align funding resources across the system. This includes strengthening Metro's coordination with Oregon Housing and Community Services to create a more efficient and effective funding system for affordable housing, continuing to strengthen the supportive housing services measure and bond integration, and supporting workforce diversity and other bond outcomes through regional workforce initiatives by leveraging Metro programs such as the Careers to Construction's Pathways program. And finally, we recommend evaluating the bond program's impact and planning for the future. The end of the bond pipeline is on the horizon. This is an important moment to understand the lessons learned from this bond and opportunities to strengthen Metro's role in supporting regional coordination. We are eager to see Metro continue this role in this regional housing pipeline beyond its planned end, and strongly urge Metro to refer another measure to voters. And finally, I'd just like to offer appreciation for Steve's work as co-chair, other members of the Oversight Committee who have brought an incredible amount of perspectives and much time and thought into this process, and then the staff as well, who have not only helped accomplish the work for this program, but also made serving on the committee very accessible, and I think a strong model for some of the technical work where you're asking community members to really weigh in, but they have done a fantastic job facilitating, preparing us as co-chairs, and the materials, presentations, and all of the components of the meeting. So just wanted to slip that in there. So thank you, and we recommend those kind of best practices in your Oversight Committee work as well. So thanks.
Well, thank you. It's a lot of good work in here, and I want to thank our co-chairs for all their public service, the double duty included. There's a lot in those two measures, and I'm glad that we were able to integrate them together and get more outcomes than we had even anticipated, so thank you. Councilors, any questions for staff or the co-chairs? Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Peterson. My laptop died, so I can't raise my hand virtually. I'm sad. I'm sad about it, but you know, we will persevere. So I'm gonna my comments kind of like go from Patricia to Jenny. So it's I'll start on the left. Just very proud, Patricia, of the work that the team has done. You know, an incredible ramp up period of resources, and just again, you know, I think that this program, you know, we hear a lot of news about what our region is, about the direction that we're going. When I think about this program, I think about, wow, you know, there's some really good work happening, and focusing on the positives of that. So thank you. To Emily, when I think of you, I think about one of my favorite movies growing up, which is the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, where he's hanging, holding the subways in New York. You know what I'm saying? And he's just like every fiber of their body to just keep it together, and to also just like pull things in and make things happen. You know, you've been at Metro for a while now, and you've just been the Tobey Maguire of the housing bond program, the Spider-Man, if I could say. So anyway, I just wanted to share that like really vivid image I have in my mind, because I just really appreciate your work, and I know it hasn't always been easy and a walk in the park, but we've just found a way to crush it, and I'm just so proud. Onto our oversight committee members, just thank you for your leadership and for your oversight, for making time out of your busy lives to be here and to serve on the committee. I have a question for you, and this kind of opens up to the table. When we originally passed the bond, we set the forecast that we did, right? And the fact that we're overperforming at 120%, my base question is, did we like undercount intentionally to overdeliver? What are the factors that you see there? Obviously, so much has happened in the economy since then. Costs have gone up, but we also went through a period with very, very cheap capital. There's been a windfall of federal and state resources to support construction, and so do you think that the 120% overperformance is kind of what do you say that's a result of? Like, try and give us a sense of what you saw up close with the work. And thank you again for being here.
I think what you suggested, I agree with you, that initially we took advantage of the federal funds that came in as a community, as well as the good interest rate environment initially. And the Head Start, Emily mentioned, everybody jumped in. We had those local implementation plans, and it was gung-ho. And now, we really could have, if things stayed the same economically, we would be way ahead in terms of the number of units. But the market changes quickly. But I think the important piece here, is that we take major steps here to develop a regional housing delivery system, affordable housing, and particularly with SHS, it's connected with services, so it's homelessness and housing. And I feel that the glass is half full right now. And clearly, if you can combine capital money, like bond money, with the rent assistance and supportive services money from SHS, we can address homelessness in this region better than any place in the country. But it will take both pieces. So that's why it's important that we really think of how we can target, I think, if we do another bond, to really address permanent supportive housing.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask our COO if she had something to insert. Her hand is raised.
Oh, I raised my hand. I'm not sure how I did that.
That's okay.
But I will take the opportunity to give Councilor Gonzalez a hard time for the Tobey Maguire being a childhood movie.
Sorry. I know it's not people's favorite Spider-Man either, but it is for me.
But also to say that I absolutely agree, and thank you, Emily, for just everything that you've done since the moment I landed at Metro. We've had moments where we've had to work really closely together to make sure that things got off the ground, and that, these deals, it's hard to describe how incredibly complex they are, how many different things have to be checked and vetted to make sure that the public dollars are going to the right place, that the public is protected, that the right people will get into these things. And it's really hard to describe the amount of work and effort and intellect that has to go into it. And you do it with grace, you make it look easy, and we're just so lucky to have you. So thank you, and thank you, Patricia, thank you, Steve and Jenny, for the service that you're providing. It's wonderful to have you as part of our oversight committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson, then Lewis, then Huang, then Rosenthal.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Director Rojas, Emily, for building this thing up and ramping it up and being intentional about the oversight of those dollars. I think that is something that's on the mind of a lot of people in the region. And it's really good to see, again, echoing Councilor Gonzalez, to see that 120% output, getting more folks housed. And I also want to say thank you again for the attention you put on veterans. I think that that's something that oftentimes gets lost in the sauce, and you pulled that out, so thank you so much. And to Steve and Jenny, thank you for, your service and volunteering. I think that, and I'm gonna echo a little bit about what you said, Steve, is, we need more folks of color in the trades. And that number, that stat line of 1.3% of women on those projects, we gotta increase that. I think that, with that, and this is maybe a question, for future projects, can we measure and evaluate those outcomes for every project so that we know where we have our gaps and where we can focus on? And that's more, I guess, directed to the staff, but I really want to thank the commitment that you all have had on this region in terms of getting folks housed, the intentionality around equity and the care of knowing where people are hurting and where to put things, so thank you.
Sure, I can speak to that. I do think there is an opportunity for the, the council to look in the future to set, regional requirements for workforce tracking. For this, for this bond, there were 2 jurisdictions that committed to tracking workforce for all of the projects. Others said they would explore opportunities. They had never done this kind of workforce tracking in the past, so we have, we have worked to offer support to scale up that reporting, to collect data where it is possible, and continue to offer that support to our jurisdictional partners. Many of the projects, already have funding contracts in place with developers, and so it can be hard to, as you know, to create new reporting requirements after contracts are in place. So those are the barriers, but we continue to offer support and assistance where we can. We're limited in the ability to change existing contracts and IGAs.
Can we just follow up on that and get a little clarification? I mean, I believe, if I'm recalling time and space correctly, the ballot measure did not have a requirement, and this was something that the council actually asked be included in after the bond measure passed. And so that's why there's no specific goal. And we had to work with our jurisdictions to do it voluntarily, not as part of the bond requirement, correct?
Yeah, that's accurate. And the council did work to incorporate that 20% COVID participation goal as a regional goal. So that is baked into all of the plans up front. But on the workforce tracking, there were, I think it was, the construction careers initiative at Metro was just getting started. That wasn't at a place where it was able to offer support. And so, but I think that's an accurate characterization.
And we also then said that we would like, working with our jurisdictional partners, our housing authorities, that they look at their procurement because there were barriers to actual BIPOC-owned contractors that were not subcontractors being able to propose on those and bid. So I think both of those things happened after the bond measure passed. But I just wanted to, because when we think to the future, what do we need to talk about that wasn't in the ballot measure that should be in the future? Those are important things.
And if I can just add, also, as you're thinking about things in the future, what the workforce looks like and the type of jobs that folks are in, so not just the aggregate numbers, but also the nature of the work or income. And then I'd also like to reflect, I think when we started out, this is a great example of opportunities for Metro to push local jurisdictions further and implement racial equity, so out of both necessity, but then offering the supports. And I think thinking back to the beginning with a flip chart, that was one of the aspirations, was also how could Metro get jurisdictions to do better in any way that they were considering housing or racial equity in this kind of work. So I think this is one of those that really came to fruition, and thank you, President Peterson, for also making sure Metro Council brought that forward after the bond was passed.
Thanks. All right, Councilor Lewis, you want to take a second? I'll call on someone.
Yeah, I think I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. First, I want to start there. I can't miss an opportunity to say to Emily, thank you so much for your incredible work. I believe at parts of this, you have been doing the work of 2.5 people. And I can't miss the opportunity to recognize that in front of your director and our COO, particularly in budget season, where I believe we're getting you some long-awaited help. So thank you for your personal leadership and dedication to this work, as well as to the professionalism just of the whole department. I think that it's really important that the LIHTC conversation continue, particularly the private activity bond issue is not just one of allocation or amount. I think there's also OHCS policy where it is slanted away from us here at Metro and towards the rural areas. And I can't miss an opportunity to bring that into the light that we are, in essence, taking a step back from where we need to be in order to make the rest of the state whole with their competitiveness. The question, I guess I have two questions or reflections. First, Steve, you were the first one to say housing department at Metro. I think you said that to me 4 years ago, and I winced. And I've changed my heart, not only because of our leadership, but I think also the accompanying measure has really demanded it. But do you have any reflections on how we could better coordinate with TOD, which is still kind of a lingering program that might need better coordination? And then my second question, we had a bit of a kerfluffle a few months ago in examining our general fund dollars that we're bringing forward into housing. And did you discuss this as an oversight committee? And do you have any policy recommendations for our general fund going forward?
I don't think we did. Okay. I'm interested now, though. But no, I don't think we did. And at TOD, I mean, I think there's ways to continue to coordinate. And you could do more than one goal, and achieve more than one goal in terms of as growth and development occurs. But the department piece is big, and this is important, I think, particularly for SHS side, where we hear all the concern about getting money out, and it's all true. But you ramp up something, it doesn't happen overnight. Metro, it's taken 2.5 years to get to the budget amendment you did today. I mean, so it's happening throughout the region, but this is difficult times. If we're going to get a system, we need to actually have an infrastructure, and then we're developing that infrastructure, I think.
Thank you.
I think the issue that we were discussing is the lack of administrative money
Absolutely.
allocated based on the bond promise, and that we had to do a little bit of subsidization in order to fill the gap.
It's a huge issue. Thank you, councilors and president. I think it's actually, in hindsight, it's probably been the biggest obstacle why we can't move faster in some ways, or do as many things as we ask the jurisdictions to do. Remember, it was a 5% cap, 2%, half of it went to Metro for its activities, but I think 2% went to all the jurisdictions divided by 8, I guess, or 7, whatever. And then there's an extra percent, which I think you're allocated now, to fill some gaps. But it's too small. I mean, we should all be sensitive about admin. But if you don't have admin or program delivery, you're not going to be able to succeed. So I think that next time we should be clearer about that.
Absolutely, and I think majority of council agrees with you, but to make sure that we're on the same page with our oversight committee as we're making those expenditures. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Councilor Wong.
Great, thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the staff and Steve and Jenny for your service. Great work. I have a couple questions, two kind of policy questions and one kind of bigger picture question. I guess on the slide, first of all, I saw that 3/4 of the units that have been produced don't have air conditioning. Is there a plan for those existing developments to, get that kind of cooling?
Yeah, so we have been working with the projects that were already in our pipeline. I think when we issued that air conditioning policy statement, about half of our projects had already planned for in-unit air conditioning and half had not, had some strategies or mechanisms in place, but not in-unit cooling. And so we've made that funding available and have multiple projects that are in the process of acquiring mobile AC units and incorporating those. Obviously, where possible, heat pumps are the ideal solution to reduce long-term energy costs, they're more sustainable, they're going to reduce costs in the long run. So where possible to plan those in on the front end, that is what that funding is supporting. And then in some cases, it is supporting the addition of mobile units where
there is a
possible.
pathway
So,
for-
so I expect that figure will look different for the final portfolio. There may be one or two projects that are not able to incorporate AC, but we expect the majority will.
Is there a pathway for the ones that are already produced?
There are, so there are a number, we've got funding requests right now that we're processing to provide some additional funding for AC, and I think we should come back to you with a final number that's going to be more accurate, because I don't think 3/4 is where we'll be at the end of implementation.
Great. And then just, I noticed a great list of partners and developers, and, since we do have a racial equity strategy, is there going to be more thought about how we build capacity in our community-based organizations, especially the culturally specific ones, to really begin to do their own kind of development and implementation of the bond dollars? I see a lot of partnerships with, big for-profit national developers. I think those are fine, but how do we set the stage so that our homegrown talent, especially our CBO partners, can begin to do that work themselves?
Yeah, I think looking across our portfolio, you see really a range of partnership structures. We have a robust network of community partners, and we're seeing, different kinds of partnerships. And so I do think there's an opportunity for us to better understand the different kinds of partnerships and how we can support that capacity building in a way that meets the needs of all of the unique organizations and best leverages capacity across the system. I think just given, the influx, this is a significant influx of new funding into a system. So I think what we've seen is a bit of an all hands on deck, a lot of organizations coming to the table and growing as a result of these investments. And I think there are opportunities to be more systemic and thoughtful about how we continue to support that capacity building in a way that works for really diverse organizations that are at different places. And I don't know if there's anything you would add to that.
No, I think that's right. And there are new opportunities that are happening every day. So yesterday, our groundbreaking, right? So ERCO is now a part owner. And that's those are really big steps in the right direction. And, there's plenty of room for us to do more. And it's the right question.
And I encourage the staff and committee to think more about how we can set policies to facilitate that kind of movement. Thanks. And then I guess my big picture question, and actually I'm gonna reference an actual childhood movie. So Back to the Future, if you could go back to 2017 when we were planning this, what would you tell kind of the stakeholder committee to really be thinking about and focusing on that front end now that we've had 5-6 years of experience? I know you mentioned the admin cap and how it's kind of hamstrung our abilities for implementation, but whatever advice or lessons learned might you bring back to us at 2017?
My take would be that it was great that the voters passed the bond. It was great, and it is great. I think a lot of the motivation was to address the homeless situation. And so it's a shame we didn't have the support of housing services money at the same time. Because I think at the end of the day, whether it's housing or homelessness, the metric's going to be, are there less people on the street? So at that point, I would say that if we knew that we could do, because this is a capital bond, and it couldn't do services, but then the SHS measure came. So to me, if we do another capital piece, it's got to be connected.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other observations, Jenny?
I think the workforce would probably be one of the biggest ones, and then having a clear sense of what was available in terms of initiatives or really getting ahead of that, because I think it was talked about, but then we kind of hit the point where we thought, oh, this data what we're hoping for is not necessarily available. And I think with data, it's also important to be intentional about what we're requesting. Data for data's sake isn't helpful, but thinking about how can that data help us answer the questions, not just for metrics, but about what we need to be creating and thinking about with the next bond.
Great, thank you. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I mean, kudos to the project and to the concept. I was not here when it was conceived. I think it's been a great effort on the part of both Metro staff as well as on the part of the committee. I think it's something that we need to talk as much as possible about to the various communities because it's been very successful. And I think also it's important to note that, and I've been to a number of these, and they're good quality units, and they're well thought out, and they consider both community as well as personal needs. And so I think they're not just sort of the run-of-the-mill, throw them up in their, prefab kind of housing. So I think it's important to note that these are quality things. I have three technical questions, I guess. I hope we continue to build on this success and continue to add housing that is necessary throughout the region. But I have three technical questions. First of all, in response to Councilor Lewis's comments about TOD, do we have any data on the number that would have qualified for TOD support? Because it seems like most of them are close to some transportation nexus. And the second question, well, I also wanted to mention a great deal of flexibility in that when the heat dome happened, and then we quickly transitioned the process into something that involved air conditioning, which is really an important thing. And then my second question is, it's my opinion that going forward, we're going to have to be building housing units that rely on induction heating, particularly for cooking, and not gas. I think that the health impacts and the safety impacts are significant. Do we see any way that that's going to be a difficult process moving forward?
Great question. I think my team is about to send me the number. I believe it's 2/3, but I want to check.
You can just feel it coming.
The number. And we can follow up. The majority of our projects are located close to rapid service bus or transit. I'll get the number in a second. We could get you an actual percentage, but there is a lot of crossover with those projects, leveraging our TOD grants as well. So 70% are located with access to transit. And then to your second question, I think there definitely could be opportunities for affordable housing to do more to support, energy smart strategies. There's a lot of work happening at the state level. There are federal requirements. Each of these projects comes with many different funding sources, all with different requirements. And so Metro did not hasn't created Metro-specific requirements around green building or energy. I do think a first step would be understanding the landscape, what exists, what tools are in place, what emerging policies and best practices, and how, what role or opportunity there is to support that work. Again, the administrative funding cap has limited our ability to kind of be fully plugged into some of those kinds of conversations or gathering that data. That is an opportunity that Metro could explore in the future, and also, know that there is kind of a broad system in place with the state and other partners who are, those engaged in those conversations. I don't know if there's anything else the two of you would add. Yeah.
All right, seeing no other hands raised. This is a moment of celebration, so I think we just need to give you all a round of applause for all of the hard work. It really is nationwide, a model that I know that everybody is looking to us, and there are a lot of things we did right, and there's some things that we can improve as we go into the future, but we did really kick some butt. So thank you. I very much appreciate every ounce of energy that it took to get to this point, so thank you. Okay, should we move on to our next, we have Chief Operating Officer Communication.
Thank you, Council President Peterson. Hello again, Council. Today, I'm just going to ask Andy Shaw, our Government Affairs Director, to come up and give a legislative update in lieu of my COO update.
Thank you. Andy Shaw, Government Affairs Director, he, him pronouns. So briefly, the state team has asked me to come give you an update on a land use bill, which you may be tracking, you may know of it. House Bill 3014 is in discussion. It's a moving target. We have some language, we don't have all the language. They're up to -19s. We're still awaiting the latest language. So the bill basically allows cities in Oregon to add land to their UGBs without regard to need. So in small cities, it's 75 acres. In mid to large size cities, 150 acres. In the Portland region, up to 600 acres one time in the next 10 years. So sort of a one-off opportunity. You don't need a concept plan, but you would need some elements of what we would normally look for in a concept plan. You would have to provide, a city would need to provide a plan for the urban services, and in particular, binding agreements with providers. That's a big piece of what we would normally look for, that a city is ready to add land to the UGB. Density would need to be 15 homes per acre in the metro area. I actually don't know what that looks like outside metro. I don't know if you've tracked that ex-metro requirement. 30% of housing has to be affordable, and there's some questions around those affordability requirements. So there's some elements of what we would look for normally in pre-planning for UGBs. In the metro area, cities would need to present a petition with landowner approval and the city's approval by July of 2024 for consideration by Metro. Metro Council would have the opportunity to review the petition, ensure that it meets the requirements of state law, but otherwise would need to approve the UGB expansion. You can imagine 600 acres, there might be multiple cities making a proposal, so Metro Council could consider up to 600 under those rules. If you received more than 600 acres, you could then choose between proposals up to that 600. Again, all of this is without regard to need. We've been a little perplexed in this whole process, trying to understand how the current system that we use, our upcoming 2024 cycle, where we consider need, of course, in looking at expansion, our recent use of this transfer of land, the land swap concept, and the pre-planning funding that we do, and the fact that nobody applied for resources this last fall to do some pre-planning for urban reserves. We're a bit perplexed as to what problem exactly is being solved here. So we've been raising all of those concerns. I want to give a shout out to our state team, to Annalisa Curler in particular, to our OMA team, to the planning department staff who've all quickly, sometimes on trains and on vacation, reviewed language and proposals so that we could arm our state folks with the best, marching orders and intelligence they have. But again, these pieces of the bill are being added into 3014, which is an underlying bill. It's a governor's priority. So as you can imagine, at this stage of the legislative session, this is when they're trying to get Republicans to return to work. They're trying to get bills to pass, and it seems to be a part of that overall agreement of returning to work, getting what they're considering a land supply bill, in addition to the governor's priority around creating a new Office of Housing Production and addressing in the underlying bill variances, limiting the ways that cities can use variances as a way to deny housing. So that's the general update. Would be happy to answer questions if you have them.
It doesn't affect rural reserves, right? It's just in urban reserves?
These would only be in urban reserves or in non-resource for cities that don't have urban reserves, non-resource lands. The normal places you would look in outside of places that have urban reserves, yes. So not class 1 farmland in Eugene, for example. So we're doing our best to try to improve what we think is either an unnecessary or a bad bill, but the underlying politics of it are it's more about getting out of the session as opposed to, if we're simply arguing the policies, we're not actually arguing what's at the core of the issue, which is getting agreement between Democrats and Republicans around some key policy issues that are take-home items.
Well, it's going to have major impacts on our, quote, needs analysis going into 2024. Go ahead, Councilor Rosenthal.
Just a question. Am I clear that these provisions would be stuffed into 3414, which is really a bill that limits the variance, the abilities of cities to deny variances? So this would be an additional aspect of that. It's not a separate, it's not a different bill.
That's correct. The underlying bill is a governor priority bill to do what you said, plus create this new Office of Housing Production, which is a dual agency office meant to support the other legislation that's been enacted already this year and in previous sessions, trying to advance housing, the housing needs analyses that cities are doing, and help achieve this larger goal of 36,000 units per year. The agreement is to add these land supply elements to the bill as a way to move the entire package forward. Again, this depends as if the Republicans agree to come back and do business at the end of the session. If they do not, then the legislature will convene a special session to address the budget and other items, and it remains to be seen whether this would be one of those other items that makes it into that short list of items that are considered in a special session. So a lot unknown, but just want to catch you up on that. It's been a lot of work for staff over the last week and a half as we learned that this was emerging as an end of session possibility.
That it?
That's it, yes.
Okay, it's a big one. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? All right, Councilor Communications. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me?
I just had a quick OMA update, if that's, I think that I thought was going to go maybe before Councilor Communications.
I see that
can be
now.
flexible. Thank you.
It's a new thing.
It's a new thing. I don't often have the pleasure of addressing council, but I wanted to kind of mark the fact that we have restarted our legal clerkship program in the Office of Metro Attorney. This is a program that is part of our equity strategy to really make sure that we can provide meaningful work experience to law students as well as expose law students to the wonderful practice of municipal law. So with that, I just wanted to briefly introduce our two law clerks for this summer and give some thanks to Rebecca Giao in our office, who is really overseeing the program along with Shane Abma. So our first law clerk that we have is Sam Russell. Sam, if you just want to raise your hand so people can put name and face together. He's a rising second-year law student at Lewis and Clark Law. He lives in Milwaukee with his wife. He did move to the area, but he intends to stay. So I think that's an important thing to note. In terms of his interests, he's particularly interested in sustainable and supportive housing initiatives and preserving green spaces and open spaces, and that's part of what attracted him to working at Metro. So we thank Sam for his time that he has spent and will spend here. Devin Gonzalez Yoxtimer is our second law clerk. He will be a third-year law student at Willamette University. Thank you, Devin, and is very interested in public policy. He is really, not surprisingly, what attracted him to working at Metro was our role in land use planning, solid waste, and preserving natural areas in the region. So delighted to have both these law students with us. They will be here over the course of the summer, and thanks in advance to counselors who've offered to spend some additional time. We'll be scheduling that over the course of the summer. So welcome to Sam and Devin, and thank you, President Peterson.
Yeah, apologies. Welcome, and thanks for thinking of working here for the summer and helping out. So thank you. Having been an intern at Metro, we'll talk about that later. Good. Counselors, Counselor Rosenthal, back to you.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I just want to compliment the Expo facility and Matthew Rochford for putting on a really great tour of the Expo facilities, including a lot of information about the Vanport Mosaic and about the imprisonment camp that was used there, and about the path going forward. That was very wonderful. Councilors Wong and Lewis also attended that. I also want to say that there was the Zoo Brew was quite successful. It was almost full capacity, even in spite of the cold weather, on Friday night, and apparently full capacity and sold out on the next day of warm weather. So it was, and the zoo was quite lovely, and it was quite a good event. And then on a personal note, I have to say in this regarding, because we had this session on housing, I get to privilege of attending this Friday, the opening of, or the groundbreaking for one of the housing projects. It's called Planbeck Gardens in Tualatin. It's actually about a mile from my house. And the reason that's important is because Doug Planbeck, the person who was named after, was a founding member of the CPAH and was also a good friend.
And his son worked for me.
Pardon?
And his son worked for me. Andrew, yeah, it's a loss. Counselors, I'm sorry, whose hand is up? Counselor Wong, then Simpson, then Lewis, then Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you. I think, speaking of groundbreakings, I had the privilege of attending a groundbreaking at the 74th and Gleason site. It was a very hot day yesterday, but this was a TOD purchase of the land, and now we'll have 2 affordable housing developments that mix supportive housing as well as our housing bond dollars. And it's a partnership with Related Northwest and ERCO and Catholic Charities. So really excited for the future of that site and kind of a showcase of all the various programs that we have to develop affordable housing.
Awesome, thank you. Counselor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to extend and take my hat off to the Expo staff, to Marisa, to Steve Falstick, for everybody and all the work they're doing in getting the rodeo, which is this Saturday, on track. We sold out, so that's a big deal. It'll be a full house. Yay. Hopefully I'll get to see some of you there if you got your ticket on time. And I just want to thank, the staff. I know it was a quick turnaround. We didn't have a whole lot of runway in front of us, but we managed to get it done. And so I'll rest on Sunday and then be prepared on Monday for Juneteenth, which I hope we all are taking a moment to reflect on Monday about what Juneteenth is about, and really teaching young folks like McCall and my kid really about the history of this country. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for all of your hard work in getting all of that ready. Counselor Lewis?
Sure, I wanted to echo thanks to Expo staff, but actually for putting on a beautiful open house last Friday. We were able to convene with staff from across the agency as well as leadership at Expo, ourselves as counselors and also commissioners. It was a great opportunity to explore what sport could mean because we had the cornhole championships of some sort, including a really cool stage that ended up on ESPN, and I saw it in a bar on TV. I saw our own Expo in a bar. It was cool. Imagine that in the future. But we also met the new JAMO executive director. She's only been at the organization for a few months, but she spoke really nicely to the work that's being done to bridge language, and that it's one thing to say that it was a space of internment, but moving towards using language around concentration because that's more accurate in terms of historical practices and what was done by the government. So lots of work to be done moving forward, but we were wined and dined, and Levy stepped up to the occasion as well. I also wanted to reflect on the opportunity to participate in the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee's annual retreat, a 2-day session held 2 Fridays and Saturday ago. Counselor Simpson joined me as our alternate. All day Friday was spent on housing, all day Saturday was spent on transportation, code word, tolling. But really good, productive conversations overall. We've seen that group move tremendously in their sophistication around housing, mostly due to the work of our measure. So even the rural communities are benefiting from the expertise that our measures are bringing to the community. Regarding tolling, I think we had some productive conversations. We also definitely had a point of divergence where County Commissioner really asked multiple times if our agency supported congestion pricing. really wanting to dig in there. So just wanted to flag that Clackamas County, I think, is questioning our allyship, even though we've been arm in arm on our work, bringing forward issues to ODOT. I do see that they're trying to put some separation between themselves and us right now. And then otherwise, want to thank everybody who made the JPAC trip possible. I assume Councilor Gonzalez, who's maybe going after me, will speak more, but I know that is a tremendous amount of work for staff in preparation, in chasing after us, in making sure that we don't lose our talking points, and in all the follow-up that is to come. Thank you, Jay, in particular, and thank you to the entire team who was there.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Sweet. All right. Trying to think of another movie reference, but I can't think of one. Trying to keep people, awake. Let's see. I think before I get into JPAC, I do want to give like a little spotlight shout out to Councilor Lewis for being 40 under 40 in the Portland Business Journal. She's the kind of like humble leader that won't like draw attention to it. But, we're elected at the same time. We're the same council class. So it's just really cool to celebrate and all that. But anyway, JPAC trip was pretty great. Largest ever contingent. We had 40 people from across the region go. And just kind of don't have the specific numbers off my head, but it was probably the most diverse in terms of gender, age, race, and to kind of like the regional distribution of what I saw. So it's really, really phenomenal. We had the opportunity to connect with nearly all of our delegates directly, and in some circumstances, their staff. Some really positive meetings with USDOT leadership around a whole bunch of different subjects, grants, civil rights, you name it. But hopefully in a few days, we'll have the opportunity to bring that group together of the Metro staff and some internal key transportation folks to talk a little bit about debrief, how we strategize, because I think there were some really, really good lessons that I'm taking away that I'm eager to share with others and see how we can just kind of use that as a catapult for next year. Councilor, anything you want to share? Or Councilor Lewis, after what I shared? Did I forget anything, miss anything?
80-second TV highway money.
Yeah.
I think that was a big sticking point.
Yeah, you're right. We did have a packet of 11 projects, policy areas of that we were kind of parading around the hill. We really suffered from some extreme smoke, actually, from wildfires in Canada. So it's nothing like a good old nostalgia of being in the Pacific Northwest in the summer, which is a bummer because we had a kind of a regional bonding activity. We're gonna go ride bikes and explore some cool infrastructure, and the smoke said not today. So yeah, just bummer. Hopefully next year. That's it for me. Thanks, President.
Thank you. I just want to round it out with a thank you to all of the staff that helped prepare the State of the Region, and to Portland Business Alliance and the City Club for hosting it, that it went really well. There were a lot of sponsors as well to make the event happen, and thank you all who were able to be in attendance, both elected from here and also from around the region. I think I got a lot of good feedback that a lot of good things are happening at Metro. And it was an opportunity to get that communications out that we've been talking about, and make sure that we are also being held accountable to what we said we would do. So there is a recording if you missed it, and yeah, it was good. It was a very well run through, smooth presentation. So I'm very thankful to everybody. With that, if there's no other comments, we are adjourned, and our next regularly scheduled meeting is June 15th at 10:30 a.m. See you all there.
Recording stopped.